I went to my husband's office to surprise him. It was our anniversary, and I brought his favorite lemon tarts, the ones I bake every year. But when I got there, the security guard smiled and said, "Oh, Mrs. Mitchell just left. You must have missed her by a few minutes." I froze. Because I am Mrs. Mitchell, and the name he mentioned, Vanessa Cole, was my husband's ex-wife. In that instant, the world around me blurred. The box of tarts slipped from my hand, and I realized maybe the marriage I trusted the most was the one built on silence. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that a single sentence broke your heart, hit that like button or leave a comment below. I read every one of them. Now let me tell you how a simple surprise visit almost tore my marriage apart, and how, in the strangest way, it saved it instead. That evening, after coming home from the company building, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. The box of tarts sat untouched on the counter, their sweetness fading into the air. I turned off the lights in the kitchen, pretending everything was fine. But inside me, something had already changed. Our life had always been calm, peaceful, maybe too peaceful. Ethan and I had been married for 3 years. We met through a friend, both tired of the chaos of our past relationships. I was drawn to his steadiness, the way he listened more than he spoke. He said he loved that I brought lightness into his life. Together, we built something quiet and safe. Every morning, he left for work at the same time. Every evening, he came home exhausted but gentle. He never raised his voice, never started an argument. Even when work stressed him out, he brushed it off with a small smile. "It's all handled," he'd say. Sometimes I wondered if life was supposed to be this quiet. We didn't fight, we didn't break, but maybe we also didn't talk enough. Ethan worked at Coastal Heights Development, a big construction company downtown. He was a project director, responsible for designs, clients, and deadlines. He often mentioned the word blueprints, but not much else. I never asked. I thought marriages didn't need explanations every day. I trusted him. And until that afternoon, I never had a reason not to. After dinner, Ethan came home later than usual. He kissed me on the forehead like always, his tie loosened, his smile tired. "Hey, you're still up?" "I was waiting for you," I said softly. "Long day," he sighed, dropping his briefcase on the couch. "We're almost done with the Harbour Street project." I nodded. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just busy," he said, and smiled faintly before heading to shower. I watched him disappear into the hallway. The same man, the same rhythm, but I couldn't stop thinking about the guard's words. Mrs. Mitchell just left. When he returned, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it quickly, then turned it over on the table, screen facing down. He had never done that before. "Who's calling?" I asked. "Just work," he said lightly. "One of the architects." The word architect hung in the air. My heart skipped once, but I smiled to hide it. Later, when we went to bed, he fell asleep almost immediately. His breathing was steady, calm, unaware. I lay beside him, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The streetlight outside threw a pale line across the wall, and I followed it until my vision blurred. I remembered the way the guard spoke her name, Vanessa, so casually, as if it was something he said every day. Vanessa Cole. I had heard that name once before. Ethan's ex-wife. They had divorced 5 years ago, long before I met him. He said it was peaceful, mutual. "She's a good person," he told me once. "We just wanted different lives." I had never met her. I didn't even know what she looked like. But now her shadow seemed to slip into my house with him. It sat between us in silence. The next morning I made breakfast, the same as always, toast, eggs, black coffee. Ethan walked in, kissed my cheek and smiled. "Smells good." "Eat before it gets cold," I said. He glanced at his watch. "I have an early meeting today. Don't wait up if I'm late." "Another long day?" He nodded. "We're finishing the paperwork for a new project." "With the same architect?" He looked at me briefly. "Yes, the same team." He didn't notice my hands trembling as I poured his coffee. When he left, I sat down at the table, staring at his cup, still half full. It was strange how something as small as a name could turn everything upside down. That day at the therapy center, I couldn't focus. The children's voices echoed around me, but my thoughts kept drifting. I remembered the calm mornings, the dinners, the weekends when he'd fix things around the house while humming under his breath. Everything had always seemed normal, too normal. But now I saw tiny cracks everywhere. The late nights, the vague answers, the way he avoided eye contact whenever I asked about work. When I got home, the house smelled like his cologne. The faint scent that used to comfort me now made me uneasy. Ethan came out of his office, smiling like always. "Hey, how was your day?" "Fine," I said. He nodded. "Good. I'll take a quick call, then we'll have dinner." He stepped into the study, closing the door halfway. I stood in the hallway, hearing the low murmur of his voice. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard a name. Vanessa. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it was about work. I wanted to believe everything was still the same. But I knew, from that moment, peace was over. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. I told myself I wouldn't go near his office again. But by noon, I was already standing at the same building, pretending to check my phone as people walked past me. The glass facade of Coastal Heights shimmered in the sun. It looked spotless. Perfect, like our marriage had once seemed. I took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. The same security guard from yesterday was there. His name tag read Harrison. When he saw me, he frowned, trying to remember. "Ma'am, you were here yesterday, right?" "Yes," I said. "I think I left something for my husband, Ethan Mitchell." He nodded politely but looked cautious. "Mr. Mitchell's in a meeting right now. Want me to let Mrs. Mitchell know you're here?" The words hit me again. "Mrs. Mitchell," I forced a smile. "No, that's fine. I'll come back later." He shrugged. "Suit yourself." As I turned away, I saw her, a tall woman with dark brown hair tied neatly in a bun, walking out through the glass doors. She wore a fitted navy suit, heels clicking against the marble floor. Her posture was effortless, confident. Even from a distance I could tell that was Vanessa. The guard called after her, "See you tomorrow, Mrs. Mitchell." She nodded with a faint smile and walked toward the parking lot. I couldn't breathe. I stepped aside, pretending to adjust my bag, and watched her get into a silver sedan. The license plate burned into my mind, 47 LMA. She drove away like she belonged here. I walked back to the lobby. My palms were damp. "Excuse me," I said to Harrison, forcing a calm voice. "Can you tell me where the HR department is? I think I got the wrong floor yesterday." He pointed to the third floor. I thanked him and walked past the turnstile, but when the elevator doors closed, I pressed 5. Ethan's office was there. The hallway was quiet. At the far end, I saw his door slightly open. I hesitated, then took a step closer. His voice floated out. Calm, measured, familiar. I peeked through the narrow opening. Ethan sat at his desk, flipping through blueprints. His tie was loosened, his expression focused. I almost stepped inside, until I heard another voice. "Everything for the Harbour Street project is ready," a man said. I recognized him from company dinners. Mark Dixon, Ethan's associate director. Ethan nodded. "Good. Vanessa submitted the final plans this morning." The sound of her name made my stomach twist. "You two work well together," Dixon said. "Not everyone can stay that civil after a divorce." Ethan's tone was flat. "She's a professional, that's all." "And Grace?" Dixon asked lightly. "She doesn't know, right?" Ethan leaned back in his chair. "No, she's sensitive about these things. I don't want to make her worry unnecessarily." Something inside me snapped. Sensitive. That's what he thought of me. Too fragile to handle the truth. Their voices faded into a blur after that. I turned and walked away, every step heavier than the last. By the time I reached the first floor, my hands were shaking. I pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the bright sunlight. The air felt too thin to breathe. Outside, cars passed by, people laughed, life went on. but everything inside me had collapsed. That evening, I sat in the kitchen again, the same spot as last night. The tarts were still on the counter, untouched. When Ethan came home, I watched him take off his jacket, hang it on the chair, smile at me like nothing had changed. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." "Busy day?" He nodded, opening the fridge. "Yeah, a lot to handle. But everything's under control." Under control. The same phrase, always the same phrase. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him about Vanessa, about why she was at his office, about why the guard thought she was his wife. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said quietly, "I thought of bringing lunch to your office today." He turned, startled. "You were at the office?" "I almost was," I lied. "But I changed my mind." He smiled, relieved. "Good thing. It was chaos in there today." "Chaos," I repeated softly. "With the project?" He nodded. "Exactly." We ate dinner in silence. I kept thinking of what he said earlier. "She's too sensitive." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe love made people blind and foolish at the same time. After dinner, he went to the study again. I heard his phone buzz twice, soft and quick. Then his voice, lower than before. I walked to the doorway and listened. "Yeah, I'll meet you tomorrow morning. No, she doesn't suspect anything. It's fine." I stepped back before he could see me. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear. When he came out later, he smiled. "What's wrong? You look pale." "Just tired," I whispered. He kissed my forehead. "Get some rest. I've got an early day tomorrow." When he fell asleep, I stayed awake. I kept seeing that hallway, that half-open door, hearing his voice saying my name. "She's too sensitive." In the dark, I finally understood something awful. The man I loved wasn't cruel or distant or unfaithful, at least not yet. But he was hiding something, and that was somehow worse. After that day, nothing felt the same. I tried to act normal, but every sound in the house carried a different weight. The door closing, his footsteps in the hallway, the sound of his phone buzzing, all of it started to mean something else. I told myself I was imagining things, but the mind doesn't forget what the heart already suspects. Ethan began coming home later than usual. Not drastically, just small shifts, 15 minutes, half an hour, sometimes an hour. When I asked, he always had a reason ready. The meeting ran long. The client changed the design. We had a last-minute call. His voice was calm, steady, like a man with nothing to hide. Maybe that's why it hurt more. There were moments, little ones, that started adding up. His phone always on silent now. His laptop password changed without mention. Once, he got a text while we were watching TV. He tilted the screen away instinctively, smiled faintly, and said, "Just Mark from the office." Then he turned the phone face down again. I didn't say anything. I laughed at the show we were watching, but my stomach twisted, because Mark didn't send hearts after his messages. I had seen the tiny red one appear before he turned the phone over. A few nights later, he came home well past 9. His shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy. He looked exhausted. "Rough day," he muttered, loosening his tie. We had to redo a whole layout. "With Vanessa?" I wanted to ask, but my throat closed up. Instead, I said, "You should have called. I was worried." He smiled weakly. "Didn't want to wake you." But I hadn't been asleep. I had sat in the dark for hours, waiting for his car to pull into the driveway. When I looked at him, I didn't just see my husband anymore. I saw questions with no answers. Who was he when he wasn't home? What was he hiding behind that calm voice and tired smile? One Saturday morning, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket while doing laundry. It was from a cafe downtown, Benny's Bistro. The date was from Thursday, a day he claimed to have worked late at the office. I stared at it for a long time. 2 coffees, 1 slice of lemon pie, not exactly a business meeting. When he came into the laundry room, I held up the receipt. "What's this?" He glanced at it quickly. "Oh, that's from lunch with a client." Since when do you eat lemon pie with clients? He chuckled softly. Since one of them ordered it. You know I don't even like lemon. His answer was smooth, unshaken. He kissed my temple and left the room. But I wasn't convinced. That night, lying beside him, I stared at the ceiling again. He slept soundly, one arm across his chest, his breathing steady. I tried to tell myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe all marriages had invisible corners you didn't always understand. But then I remembered the guard's face, the way he said Mrs. Mitchell with certainty. The picture started forming in my mind piece by piece, and it scared me how easily I could fill in the blanks. I started noticing the scent of perfume that wasn't mine on his shirts, the faint trace of something floral and sharp. I tried to ignore it, to believe it was from the office, maybe from someone passing by, but it kept happening. One evening, he came home unusually quiet. He sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just work stuff." He looked at me then, maybe sensing my stare. "You've been distant lately. Something wrong?" I wanted to say yes, but the words refused to form. Instead, I smiled. "I'm fine." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to his phone. That night, I realized something I didn't want to admit. I was starting to hide too, my thoughts, my doubts, my fear. We were two people living in the same house, both pretending everything was fine. The next morning, I watched him leave for work. Same time, same kiss, same routine. But this time, I didn't wave from the window. I stood still, holding the curtain, watching his car disappear down the street. I didn't trust his words anymore. I trusted his patterns. And lately, those patterns were changing. The next Thursday, Ethan left for work earlier than usual. He kissed me goodbye, saying, "We've got an early meeting downtown." His voice was calm, his smile the same as always. But I noticed something different. He took the car keys, not his company truck. I waited a few minutes after he drove away, then grabbed my bag and called a ride. I told myself I wasn't spying, just clearing my doubts. But deep down, I knew exactly what I was doing. The traffic was light. When we reached the downtown plaza, I asked the driver to stop across from Coastal Heights. From where I sat, I could see the front entrance clearly. People came and went, employees, clients, delivery men. The minutes passed slowly, painfully. Then I saw her, Vanessa. She arrived just before 9 o'clock, wearing a light grey blazer, holding a stack of documents. Her hair was tied back, neat and perfect. She looked like she belonged there. A few minutes later, Ethan's car pulled into the lot. He got out, said something to her, and they walked inside together. I felt something break inside my chest. For the next 2 hours, I sat there, pretending to scroll through my phone while my heart pounded in my ears. I wanted to believe it was just business. But they looked too comfortable, too familiar. He had never mentioned meeting her. Around noon, I saw them come out again. But this time they weren't alone. A young boy, maybe 6, was holding Vanessa's hand. He had dark brown hair, the same deep color as Ethan's. His small face carried something painfully familiar, the same eyes, the same smile lines near the mouth. My breath caught. Vanessa bent down to fix his jacket, then said something that made the boy laugh. Ethan crouched next to him, handing him a small toy car from his pocket. The boy's eyes lit up. Ethan smiled, a warm, tender smile I hadn't seen in months. My hands trembled so badly that I almost dropped my phone. I quickly looked away, terrified that someone would notice me. The three of them stood together for a few minutes before Ethan got into his car and left. Vanessa and the boy walked down the street toward the cafe on the corner. I couldn't stop watching. Something about the boy, his posture, his chin, even the way he tilted his head, was exactly like Ethan. I whispered to myself, no, it can't be. But what if it was? What if that child was the reason for all the late nights, the phone calls, the lies, a secret life carefully kept just out of reach? I waited until Vanessa and the boy went inside the cafe. My heart was pounding, my palms sweaty, but I needed to see more. I crossed the street and peeked through the window. They were sitting at a corner table. Vanessa was talking to the boy softly, smiling as she stirred his drink. Her hand brushed his hair the way mothers do. The boy laughed again, his face turning toward the light. The resemblance was undeniable. I stepped back, my throat tight, vision blurring. I had seen enough. When I returned home, I felt sick. The house felt foreign, as if every picture frame and cup belonged to someone else. Ethan came home around 7 o'clock, cheerful as usual. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, kissing my cheek. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I murmured. "Long day?" "Yeah." He smiled, walked to the kitchen and opened the fridge. "Want me to make tea?" "No," I said quickly. "I'm going to bed early." He didn't press. He never did. When I lay in bed that night, I could still see the boy's face, his hair, his eyes, his chin, the same as Ethan's. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe I was losing my mind. But coincidence doesn't smile the same way your husband does. I turned to look at Ethan as he came into the bedroom. He changed quietly, slipped under the blanket, and turned off the lamp. Within minutes, he was asleep, peaceful. I stared at him in the dark, my mind running wild. The image of the child wouldn't leave me. Every breath he took sounded like another secret I didn't know. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Ethan was still asleep beside me, his breathing even, his face calm. I watched him for a long time, searching for something familiar. But everything about him looked different now. The silence between us felt heavier than words. I got out of bed quietly and went to the kitchen. The house was still dark. I poured a cup of coffee and stared at the steam rising from it. My hands were cold. I wanted to tell myself it was all a misunderstanding, that I had overreacted, but deep down, I knew something had changed forever. When Ethan came in, he smiled like nothing was wrong. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," I answered. He looked at me for a second, then nodded. "Big day at work. We're meeting the city planners about the harbour project." "With Vanessa?" I asked without looking at him. He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "Yeah, she's part of the team now." My chest tightened. "I didn't know you were working with her again." "It's just business," he said quickly. "She's a good architect, that's all." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course." He finished his coffee, kissed my cheek, and left. I watched his car disappear down the street again. That familiar ache came back, the one that had been sitting quietly inside me for days. I couldn't stop thinking about the boy. Mason. That must be his name. It fit him somehow. I pictured his small hands clutching the toy car, his laugh when Ethan handed it to him. It didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like truth hiding in plain sight. By afternoon, my mind wouldn't rest. I went back to the plaza again, telling myself it would be the last time. I sat on the same bench, under the same tree, watching the building's glass doors. Around noon, I saw Vanessa come out with the boy again. They were holding hands, the way a mother and son do. A woman joined them, older, maybe in her 30s, carrying a paper bag. She smiled at the boy and kissed his forehead. They all walked down the street together. I followed them from a distance. They stopped at the same cafe as before. I stood by the corner, pretending to look at my phone, while my heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. The woman with them looked weak, pale, but kind. She reached out to fix the boy's hair while Vanessa ordered something at the counter. The boy laughed and showed her the toy car again, the same one Ethan had given him. My throat went dry. They sat there for a long time, talking, laughing softly. Then the older woman took the boy's hand, and they walked toward a nearby clinic. Vanessa followed behind, carrying the paper bag. I stayed outside, too scared to move. After a while, Vanessa came out alone. She looked tired, almost sad. She sat on a bench across the street and covered her face with her hands. For a second, I saw something in her. Not the confident woman from Ethan's stories, but someone fragile, someone carrying too much. But pity didn't erase the questions. When I got home, Ethan was already there. He smiled when he saw me. "You're early," he said. "I finished my session sooner," I replied. He nodded. "That's good." We ate dinner quietly. He talked about a new project deadline. I nodded at the right moments, pretending to listen. My mind was somewhere else entirely, in that cafe, watching him laugh with the boy through the glass. Later that night, he fell asleep quickly, as he always did. I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. The moonlight spilled across the room, faint and cold. I turned my head toward him, studying the man I thought I knew better than anyone. His face looked peaceful, untouched by worry. The same face that once made me feel safe. Now it just filled me with doubt. How much did I really know about him? The man who said he loved me, who promised no secrets, no lies. The man who hid his phone when it rang. The man who smiled too calmly when I asked about his day. I reached out my hand, almost touching his shoulder, then stopped. My chest ached, my throat burned. The words I wanted to say got trapped inside me. In that quiet room, I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding for days. Do I really know the person sleeping next to me? The answer didn't come. Only silence did. By Friday, I couldn't take it anymore. The questions had turned into noise that never stopped. I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Proof that the man I loved wasn't lying straight to my face. Ethan left for work at 8:15, same as always. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my purse, phone, and jacket. I didn't even plan what I would do. My body just moved. The ride to downtown felt endless. When the car stopped near Coastal Heights, my heart was pounding so hard I thought the driver could hear it. I thanked him and stepped out, my hands trembling. I crossed the street and stood near the plaza where I could see the parking lot clearly. At 9 o'clock, Vanessa's silver sedan pulled in. The boy was with her again, Mason. He jumped out of the car, holding a small backpack with cartoon heroes printed on it. Vanessa leaned down, fixed his jacket, and kissed his forehead. The tenderness of that gesture made my stomach twist. She took his hand, and they went inside the building together. 10 minutes later, Ethan's car arrived. He went through the same entrance. No hesitation, no surprise, as if this routine had existed long before I ever found out. I stood there for hours, watching from the same bench, pretending to check my phone while my world kept shrinking. Around 3 in the afternoon, Vanessa and the boy came out. Ethan didn't. She looked calm, talking on the phone as Mason played with his toy car. They walked down the street toward the cafe again, Benny's Bistro, the same one from the receipt. I followed them, staying far enough not to be noticed. They sat at a table by the window. Mason was eating ice cream, swinging his legs under the chair. Vanessa smiled at him, her hand resting gently on his hair. It was such an ordinary scene, and yet it hurt more than anything I had ever imagined. After about 20 minutes, a woman joined them, the same pale woman I'd seen before. Vanessa stood to hug her. They talked for a bit, then the woman kissed Mason's forehead. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw Vanessa hand her a small envelope. The woman looked relieved, her eyes glistening. Mason hugged her tightly. Something inside me froze. I had no idea who she was, but the moment I saw them together, the story wrote itself in my mind. The woman was Ethan's lover. Vanessa was helping him hide the child. That's why they met in secret. That's why he lied. It made perfect sense. Too perfect. I took a few pictures with my phone. My hands were shaking, the camera barely steady, but I captured enough. Vanessa, the boy, the woman. Proof. At least that's what I told myself. When I got home, I couldn't sit still. I walked around the house, checking the time every few minutes. My mind replayed everything I'd seen. Every gesture, every smile, every detail. By the time Ethan's car pulled into the driveway, I had already decided I would say nothing. Not yet. I needed to know everything first. He walked in, dropped his keys on the counter, and smiled. "Hey, you're quiet tonight." "I'm just tired," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Long day?" I nodded. "Something like that." He poured himself a drink, took a sip, then looked at me. "You sure everything's okay?" Yes, I lied. We ate dinner together. He talked about the project, about deadlines, about the city council's new permits. I nodded, pretending to listen. Inside, I was miles away, sitting outside that cafe again, watching him hand a toy to a boy who could have been his son. Later that night, while he was in the shower, I unlocked his phone. My hands shook, but I managed to find the passcode, his birth year and mine combined. It opened. My heart stopped. There were messages from Vanessa. Thanks for the help. Mason had a great time. I'll pay you back when I can. Ethan's reply came right after. Don't worry about it. Take care of him. I stared at the screen, numb. That was it. The truth, the proof, the betrayal. When he came out of the bathroom, I quickly locked the phone and put it back. He smiled at me before turning off the light. You okay? Yeah, I whispered, but I wasn't. As he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. The images kept looping in my head. Vanessa, the boy, the woman, the messages. Every piece fit perfectly, too perfectly. The next morning I couldn't pretend anymore. Every time Ethan smiled, every time he said, I love you, it sounded like a lie rehearsed to perfection. He left for work as usual, and 5 minutes later I followed. The air felt thick, heavy, almost electric. I took the same spot across from Coastal Heights, hidden by the row of trees. At 9 o'clock sharp, Vanessa's car appeared again. Mason jumped out, holding the same little backpack. His hair caught the light, the same dark brown as Ethan's. She held his hand and led him inside. 10 minutes later, Ethan arrived. I watched him greet the guard, then disappear through the doors. The routine was too perfect, too practiced. I waited until 3 in the afternoon. My back hurt from sitting so long, but I couldn't leave. Around that time, Vanessa and Mason came out. This time, they didn't head toward the cafe. Instead, Vanessa took Mason's hand and crossed the street toward the clinic on the next block. I followed them at a distance, my heart beating like thunder. They entered the building, a children's medical center. Through the glass doors, I saw them at the reception desk. The nurse asked something, then called out a name. Mason Harper. I froze. The syllables rang in my head like a bell. Harper. Ethan's middle name was Harper. He'd told me once it was a family name, passed down from his grandfather. My chest tightened. I stepped closer to the glass door, trying not to be noticed. Mason sat on a chair, swinging his legs while Vanessa filled out paperwork. The nurse smiled at him, then led them inside. I stood there, staring through the glass until they disappeared down the hall. The world around me blurred. When I finally moved, my legs felt numb. I walked to the corner of the block and leaned against a lamppost, my breath shaky. I took out my phone and opened the pictures from yesterday. Ethan, Vanessa, and Mason in the same frame. I zoomed in on the boy's face, his chin, his eyes, even the tiny curve of his smile. It was Ethan's. There was no denying it anymore. My husband had a son he never told me about. I wanted to cry, but no tears came, only this hollow ache spreading through my chest. After a while, Vanessa came out of the clinic, holding Mason's hand. He looked tired but happy, clutching a small sticker the nurse must have given him. She said something that made him laugh. Her face softened, a kind of love that couldn't be faked. They walked toward the cafe again. I followed them, but this time my steps were slower, heavier. I didn't care if someone saw me. I just needed to see how far this lie went. At the cafe, they sat by the window again. I took a table outside where I could see them clearly. The waitress brought Mason a chocolate muffin. He grinned, showing tiny white teeth. Vanessa wiped the crumbs from his face, smiling gently. The sight twisted my stomach. Ethan must have been helping them financially. Maybe he was paying for the child's school, his doctor visits, their home. It all made sense now. The late nights, the vague answers, the hidden messages. I imagined the conversation that must have happened years ago, the confession that never reached me. Maybe the affair had started before our marriage. Maybe he'd promised Vanessa to keep the child a secret. Maybe that's why she looked so calm, so confident walking in and out of his office every day. I felt small, stupid, invisible. When I got home, Ethan was already there. He looked up from his laptop, smiling. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said quietly. "How was work?" "It was fine." He nodded, typing something, unaware that my world had already collapsed. I watched him, wondering how many times he'd looked me in the eye and lied. Later that night, he sat beside me on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "You're quiet again," he said. "I'm just tired," I replied. "You've been tired a lot lately," he teased softly. I forced a smile. "Yeah, maybe I need a break." He reached for my hand. "You know I love you, right?" I looked at him. For a second, I wanted to believe him, but the name Mason Harper echoed in my head, louder than his words. I pulled my hand away slowly. "I know," I said, but I didn't. That night, as he slept, I lay awake staring into the dark. I replayed every detail, the clinic, the nurse's voice, the boy's face, the middle name. If he could hide something that big, what else could he be hiding? The next few days passed in a blur. I barely spoke to Ethan. I smiled when I had to, cooked dinner out of habit, answered his questions with short words. Inside, everything was noise, the kind that never stops. He seemed to notice something was off, but he didn't press. Maybe he thought I was tired. Maybe he didn't care enough to ask. On Wednesday morning, he left earlier than usual again. I waited 15 minutes, then followed. The streets were still damp from last night's rain. I parked across the plaza, the same spot as before, and waited. At 9 o'clock, Vanessa arrived. 10 minutes later, Ethan's car appeared. They went inside together, laughing at something. The sight hit me like a punch. I stayed there until lunchtime. When they came out, Vanessa was holding a folder, Ethan walking beside her, their conversation quiet but close. They looked comfortable, too comfortable. As they reached the parking lot, Ethan leaned toward her slightly, said something that made her smile. My vision blurred. I turned away quickly before they could see me. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but fear kept me silent. What if I asked and he actually told me? What if everything I suspected turned out to be real? That evening, when he came home, I pretended to be asleep. I heard him shower, walk around the room quietly, then climb into bed. The mattress dipped slightly under his weight. He turned toward me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "I love you," he whispered. His breath was warm against my skin. I lay still, pretending not to hear. The next day, he mentioned he had to visit a construction site in the afternoon. "It's out near Riverview," he said, packing his laptop. "Might be late." "Will Vanessa be there?" I asked suddenly. He froze for a fraction of a second. "Probably. She handles part of the design." "I see." He smiled faintly. "Don't worry, it's just work." Just work. When he left, I waited half an hour, then followed again. I didn't know what I was looking for anymore. Proof, confession, pain, maybe all of it. The site was on the edge of the city, near the river. I parked a block away and watched from the corner. His car was already there. He stood with a group of people, including Vanessa. They were reviewing blueprints, talking, pointing at the half-built structures. Everything looked normal, professional, and yet, every time he leaned closer to her, my heart clenched. After a while, Vanessa walked away, answering her phone. She stood near the fence, her back turned. Ethan followed a few steps behind her, talking quietly. I couldn't hear much, only fragments carried by the wind. "Don't tell her yet." "She doesn't need to know." "Mason's fine." That was enough. My breath hitched, my knees felt weak. I stepped back, hiding behind the car until they finished talking. When I got home that evening, I didn't even know how I made it through the door. I dropped my bag on the floor and sank onto the couch. The house felt empty, lifeless. The air was thick with silence. When Ethan came in hours later, he looked exhausted. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You sure?" "Yeah, just tired." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and went to shower. I watched his back as he disappeared down the hallway, and for the first time, I felt like I was watching a stranger walk through my house. Later that night, he fell asleep quickly, his breathing slow and steady. I turned to face him, my eyes burning. I wanted to shake him, to demand answers, to scream the questions that kept me awake for nights, but the words died on my tongue. I looked at him, the man who once made me feel safe, the man who promised honesty, and all I saw was a wall of silence. I whispered into the dark, "Why couldn't you just tell me?" The only answer was his steady breathing. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my body trembling with exhaustion. Every sound, every memory, every word between us had turned into doubt. And for the first time since our wedding, I didn't know if I still believed in us. That night, I couldn't take the silence anymore. The weight of it pressed against my chest until I could barely breathe. Ethan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone when I finally spoke. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up, surprised. "About what?" "You know what?" I said quietly. He set his phone down slowly. "All right, talk to me." I stood there for a second, unsure where to start. The words tangled in my throat. "How long were you planning to keep it from me?" "Keep what from you?" His tone was calm, but his eyes tightened. I took a step closer. "Vanessa, the boy, the lies." He froze. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. "Grace," he said finally, "what are you talking about?" "Don't do that," I snapped. "Don't act like you don't know. I've seen you with her. I've seen the boy. I know Ethan." He leaned back slowly, his jaw tightening. "You followed me?" "I had to," I said. "You wouldn't tell me the truth, so I found it myself." He was quiet for a long time, then sighed heavily. "You weren't supposed to see any of that." "So it's true?" He rubbed his forehead. "It's not what you think." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "It never is." He stood up. "Grace, please, sit down." "I don't want to sit down, I want the truth." He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his eyes shifted. Resignation, maybe. Sadness. "All right, the boy's name is Mason. He's not my son." I wanted to believe him, but the images in my head wouldn't go away. I saw him. "He looks exactly like you." "I know," he said softly. "Everyone says that, but he's not mine." I crossed my arms, my voice trembling. "Then why hide it? Why the secret meetings? Why the lies?" He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Because Mason's mother, Harper, is Vanessa's sister. She's been sick, very sick, and Vanessa asked me for help." I stared at him, trying to process the words. "Help? What kind of help?" "She needed money for Harper's surgery. I loaned it to her. When Harper was in the hospital, Vanessa had to take care of the boy. Sometimes she needed someone to pick him up, take him to appointments. I helped. That's it." I shook my head slowly. "And you couldn't tell me that?" He looked down. "I didn't want you to worry. Harper didn't want anyone to know. She was embarrassed about needing help. And I was afraid you'd misunderstand." "Misunderstand?" I said bitterly. "You mean afraid I'd think exactly what I thought?" "Yes," he said quietly. I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly weak. The room spun slightly. "So all this time, all those nights you came home late, the phone calls, were about her treatment," he finished. "About making sure she and the boy were okay." I covered my face with my hands. "You should have told me." He sat down across from me. "I know. I just thought keeping it simple would spare you pain." I looked at him, tears burning my eyes. "You don't spare someone you love by lying to them, Ethan. You destroy them." He didn't answer. He just sat there, his hands clasped, his shoulders tense. For the first time, he looked small, not strong, not distant, just human. After a long silence, he said softly, "I never wanted to hurt you. I was trying to protect everyone." "From what?" "From the truth," he whispered. And somehow that hurt even more. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The air in the room was heavy, thick with everything unsaid. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. I could hear the faint tremor in his breathing. Finally, I said quietly, "Tell me everything. No more half-truths." He nodded slowly. "All right. Harper is Vanessa's younger sister. She's a single mum. Her husband died in a car accident 2 years ago. Since then, she's been raising Mason alone. A few months ago, she found out she had a serious condition. She needed surgery, but she didn't have insurance that covered it. Vanessa came to me. She didn't know who else to ask." "Why you?" I asked bitterly. "Because I used to be part of their lives," he said. "When Vanessa and I were married, Harper was still in college. I knew her well. And when I heard what happened, I couldn't turn away. I loaned her money for the hospital, helped with Mason when Vanessa couldn't." He rubbed his hands together slowly. "It wasn't about the past. It was about doing what's right." I swallowed hard. "So that's why I saw you with them, the clinic, the cafe." He nodded. "Yes, Mason had to see a specialist. Vanessa couldn't leave Harper alone at the hospital, so I helped. That's all it was." I stared at him, searching his face for lies, for cracks, for anything that didn't fit. But all I saw was exhaustion. "You could have told me," I said softly. "You should have told me." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I kept thinking it was temporary, that Harper would recover and everything would go back to normal. I thought I was protecting you from worry, but I see now I was just protecting myself from a difficult conversation." The honesty in his tone cut deeper than the lies ever did. He looked at me, his eyes tired. "I never cheated on you, Grace. I never betrayed you. But I did hide things. And I hate that it made you doubt everything." My throat tightened. "You made me feel like I was losing my mind, like I was crazy for noticing things that didn't add up." He reached across the table slowly, his hand hovering before mine. "I know, and I'll spend as long as it takes making it right." I didn't take his hand, not yet. Instead, I asked, "Does Vanessa know I found out?" He shook his head. "No. She doesn't know you were following her." "Good," I said quietly. "I don't want her pity." He sighed. "Vanessa was worried about this exact thing, that helping her family would cause trouble between us. She even told me to tell you, but I didn't. I thought it would only hurt you more." I let out a shaky laugh. "You really thought silence was safer than truth?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but I was wrong." For a moment, everything went still. The house felt smaller, like the walls were listening. I looked at him again, this man who was both my comfort and my pain. I wanted to be angry, but part of me was just tired. Finally, I said, "You know what hurts the most? Not that you helped them, not even that you hid it. It's that you decided for me, you chose what I should know, what I could handle, like I wasn't your partner, just someone you needed to protect." He swallowed hard. "You're right. I didn't marry you for protection, Ethan. I married you because I wanted someone to share the truth with, even when it hurts." He nodded again, eyes glistening. "And I forgot that." For the first time, his voice cracked. "I was afraid, Grace. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd think I still cared for Vanessa." I looked at him, and for a moment, all the anger drained out of me. What was left was something quieter. Disappointment, maybe, or understanding. "You're wrong," I said softly. "I didn't stop trusting you because of Vanessa. I stopped trusting you because you went silent." He didn't speak. He just sat there, his eyes fixed on me, tears glimmering at the edge. In that silence, I finally understood. The distance between us hadn't been built by betrayal. It had been built by unspoken words. the kind we both thought would keep the peace, and that was the real damage. 2 days later, I got a message from Vanessa. She asked if we could meet. For a long time, I just stared at the screen, unsure whether to answer. In the end, I typed one word: okay. We met at a small coffee shop downtown that afternoon. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Without the business suit and office poise, she looked softer, almost tired. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure I should," I admitted. "I know, but we need to clear this up." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a deep breath. "I know you think Ethan kept me a secret for the wrong reasons, but he didn't lie to hurt you. He stayed silent to protect someone else's dignity." Her words hit me like a stone. She looked straight into my eyes. "Harper's been very sick. She didn't want anyone to pity her. Ethan helped us because we had no one else. That's all this was about." I swallowed hard. "Then Mason is my nephew," she finished gently. "Harper's son, not Ethan's, never was." I could only nod. All the images in my head, the clinic, the toy car, the smiles, began to blur and shift into something else, something less sinister and more human. Vanessa continued. "Ethan was there when Harper's husband died. He helped with the funeral arrangements. That's why Mason remembers him. He calls him Uncle Ethan, nothing more." I closed my eyes for a moment. The weight of shame settled over me. "How could I not see it?" I murmured. "Because you were scared," she said simply. "Fear turns good people into strangers. You're not the first to misunderstand kindness." I looked at her. There was no anger in her face, only a quiet sadness. "You're a better woman than I imagined," I said. She smiled faintly. "No, just a woman who made her own mistakes." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain starting outside. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft. "Harper will be all right now. The surgery went well. She's resting at home with Mason. He asks about Ethan all the time." I nodded. "That boy, he really looks like him." "Everyone says that," Vanessa laughed quietly. "Harper's late husband looked a lot like Ethan. Same eyes, same smile. That's why Mason was so attached. He misses his father." The room blurred again, but this time from tears I didn't hide. Everything I had believed, the lies I had built myself, fell apart quietly, without fanfare. Vanessa reached across the table. "Grace, you're not a bad person. You just loved him too much to think clearly." I wiped my eyes. "I hurt him too, didn't I?" She nodded. "Yes, but he understands." Outside, the rain was coming down hard now, softening the city's edges. Vanessa stood and put on her coat. "Go home. Talk to him. You both deserve peace." I walked out with her. We stopped by the corner where a small playground stood. A little boy was on the swings, his laughter echoing through the rain. Mason. Harper was sitting on a bench nearby, pale but smiling, watching him. Vanessa waved to them. Mason saw me and grinned. "Hi," he shouted, swinging higher. I smiled back, my heart tight. He was just a child, innocent, happy, alive. In that moment, everything inside me shifted. The anger, the doubt, the fear, they all started to fade. I understood now that the enemy had never been Vanessa or Ethan. It had been my own silence, my own imagination running wild in the dark. When I got home that evening, I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the quiet of our house. It didn't feel cold anymore, just still, like something was waiting to begin again. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without pain. That evening, I found Ethan in the living room, sitting by the window. The light from the street outside fell across his face, tracing the lines of exhaustion I hadn't noticed before. For a long time, I just stood there, unsure how to start. Then I said quietly, "I met Vanessa today." He turned to me slowly. "You did?" "Yes." She told me everything. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, as if he'd been waiting for that. I took a breath. She said you didn't lie to hurt me. You stayed silent to protect someone else's dignity. He looked down, his hands clasped together. That's true. The words came out of me before I could stop them. Ethan, I followed you. For days. I watched you with her. I saw Mason. I even went to the clinic. He was still for a moment. Then he nodded again, his voice calm. I know. You knew? I figured, he said softly. You've been different. I could feel it. I stared at him, waiting for anger that never came. You're not mad? He shook his head. No, just sad that you felt you couldn't ask me. I sat down across from him. I didn't trust you. I thought you were lying. I thought that boy was yours. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. I lied by omission, Grace. That's still lying. You had every reason to doubt me. We were quiet for a while, listening to the wind outside. The words between us had finally run out of places to hide. I kept thinking, I said, if I asked you, you'd deny it, that you'd make me feel crazy. So I watched instead. I hurt myself trying to find proof that didn't exist. He looked at me then, his eyes full of something heavy and human. And I kept thinking if I told you, you'd think I still cared for Vanessa, that you'd see me as someone I'm not. So we were both afraid, I said softly. He nodded. Yeah, afraid of each other's silence. For a long time, neither of us moved. Then I whispered, I'm sorry. He smiled faintly. So am I. The apology didn't fix everything, but it made breathing easier. He got up, walked over and sat beside me. Grace, he said quietly, I never wanted to build a wall between us. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that keeping quiet hurt you more than the truth ever could. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. I just wanted you to trust me enough to share it. I should have, he said. There was a pause. The room felt warmer somehow, smaller but safer. I looked at him through the blur of tears. From now on, I whispered, no more silence, even if the truth hurts. He reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. Even if it hurts, he repeated. We sat there together, both too tired to pretend anymore. After a while, I said, I thought I lost you. He shook his head. You didn't lose me. You just stopped seeing me through the noise. That made me cry harder. He wrapped his arms around me and held me close. For the first time in a long time, I let myself cry without holding back. The tears came fast, deep, years of unspoken fears washing away all at once. He didn't say a word, he just held me tighter. I thought if I stayed quiet, I'd keep the peace, he whispered. But peace built on silence is fragile. It breaks at the first sound of doubt. I thought asking questions would destroy us, I said through tears. But not asking almost did. He brushed his hand gently through my hair. Then let's start over. This time with honesty, no matter how ugly it gets. I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. We stayed like that for a long time, the rhythm of our breathing slowly falling in sync. The house felt different, no longer cold, no longer haunted by suspicion. It was still the same space, but the silence inside it had changed. I pulled back slightly and looked at him. Do you forgive me for spying? He smiled. Do you forgive me for hiding? I nodded, tears still on my cheeks. Yes. Then we're even, he said softly. We both laughed quietly through the tears, and for the first time in weeks, the sound felt natural. When we finally let go, I realized that nothing around us had really changed. Not the furniture, not the room, not even the air. The only thing different was the weight lifted from between us. That night, when we went to bed, he took my hand under the blanket and whispered, No more walls. No more secrets, I answered. and for the first time in a long time, the silence between us felt like peace again. A year later, everything looked different, not because the world had changed, but because I finally had. Harper had recovered completely. The doctors called it a miracle of timing and care, but I called it a miracle of faith. She went back to work slowly, smiling more often now, stronger each day. Mason was growing fast, full of energy and laughter. He came to our house almost every weekend. To him, we were simply Uncle Ethan and Aunt Grace. No confusion, no shadows from the past. Vanessa met someone too, a kind man named Dominic, a teacher at Mason's school. They started dating 6 months after Harper's surgery. When Ethan told me, I smiled genuinely for the first time about her. People who survive storms deserve calm seas. That summer, we invited everyone over for a family lunch. It was warm, loud, messy, the way happiness should be. Harper brought a homemade pie, Mason brought his drawings. Vanessa and Dominic came together, laughing at something on the way in. Ethan was at the grill, teasing Mason about stealing cookies before lunch. I stood by the window watching them, a quiet smile spreading on my face. There was no tension now, no awkwardness, just people who had been through enough to understand that peace wasn't something you found, it was something you built. After we ate, Mason ran into the living room, carrying a picture frame he had made at school. Inside was a drawing of all of us, Ethan and me, Harper, Vanessa, Dominic, and him, all holding hands under a bright sun. "It's our family," he said proudly. Harper ruffled his hair. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Ethan crouched down beside him. "You forgot someone," he said gently. "Who?" Mason asked. Ethan pointed to the small cradle in the corner of the room. "Your baby cousin." Mason's eyes widened. "Oh, right. The baby!" He ran over to the cradle where our daughter Ella was sleeping. She was only 3 months old, tiny and perfect. Mason peeked in and whispered, "She's so small. Can I show her my cars when she wakes up?" "Of course," I said. "She'll love that." Ethan came up behind me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "She already does," he whispered. The afternoon passed with laughter and stories. Harper sat with me on the porch later, holding a cup of tea. "You know," she said, "it's strange how pain sometimes leads us exactly where we're supposed to go." I smiled. "It does. We just don't see it when we're in it." She looked at me, eyes soft. "Thank you for forgiving him. For forgiving us, really." "There was nothing to forgive," I said quietly. "We all just needed to learn how to talk again." Inside, Ethan was helping Mason build a small tower of blocks. Vanessa was showing Dominic the photo albums. The house was full of warmth, not perfect, but real. When evening came, we all gathered in the living room for dessert. Ethan raised a glass. "To second chances," he said. "To honesty," Harper added. "To family," Vanessa said. Mason lifted his cup of juice high. "To Ella!" Everyone laughed, and I felt tears sting my eyes. Later, after everyone left and the house grew quiet again, I stood by Ella's cradle, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. Ethan came up beside me, slipping his hand into mine. "She looks like you," he whispered. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe she'll take your calm instead of my chaos." He smiled. "Either way, she's ours." I nodded. "Yes, she's proof that we made it." He kissed my forehead softly. We did. We sat on the couch afterward, the lights dim, the house still. I leaned my head against his shoulder and said quietly, "You know, I used to think love was about never doubting each other, but now I see it differently." He looked at me, waiting. "No secret is more dangerous than silence between two people who love each other," I said. "And mature love is not the absence of doubt, it's choosing dialogue over assumption." He smiled, his eyes warm. "That's the truth, Grace," I smiled back. "Finally." Ella stirred softly in her cradle, letting out a small sigh. The house felt whole again. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of silence. And if you've been through something like this, If silence ever stood between you and someone you love, I hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to speak. No matter how deep the hurt runs, truth has a way of healing what lies can't. I Am channel name, where true stories are told with honesty so that everyone can find their own strength. If this story touched you, please support us by leaving a comment below, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with your friends. Thank you for listening all the way through. May God bless you and your family.